Hello everyone, welcome to the Readiness Report with the Daily Maverick, Redi Tlhabi from Washington. So good to be with you. In the last 2 days, I woke up to WhatsApps from panicked and concerned South Africans saying, what on earth is going on? What are these sanctions going to do? Are we in trouble? How seriously should we take this? Sanctions have been passed. This is exactly what I tried to avoid in my previous podcast. You will recall that you and I spent time together where I broke down the journey of a piece of legislation in the US. I told you that a member of the House has to suggest or introduce a bill. It needs to be co-sponsored by others. And then it goes to committee level if it has enough co-sponsors. At committee level, this time it would be the Foreign Affairs Committee. If it passes at committee level, it then goes to Congress. It starts at the House, where there are 435 members. I told you that. And then if it passes the House, it's not a fait accompli. It has to fight for its legitimacy in the Senate. Now, these things get debated. They go back and forth. Others counter the piece of legislation. Others support it. Already, even with this one that has everyone all worked up, that is the US RSA Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025. They're calling it HR 2633. I said to you that it had 5 co-sponsors, including the lawmaker who introduced it. Okay, so obviously there have been developments. Is it a significant development? It is an important development. It's an important development. It means that he was able to lobby in the committee bipartisan support for it to pass the committee with 34 to 16 votes. That is a big gap. 16 to 34, a difference of 18. That means enough Democrats voted with Republicans on this one in the committee. But what since happened? I woke up to headlines that are false, exactly what I tried to caution. ENCA, I'll mention them because that's where I saw it. It said US to impose sanctions on South Africa. And in the report, they say the US is considering. Okay, let's pause. US to impose sanctions on South Africa and US is considering are 2 different things. There are no sanctions imposed on South Africa or the ANC or South African business or targeted at whoever. Not yet, anyway. The first bill that I told you about had no co-sponsors. It's probably dead in the water. This one has elevated. It elevated from committee. It'll now go to Congress. And it's not a given because there the contestation happens. Even at committee level, there are lawmakers who are saying you are basing this on a false narrative of white genocide. There was one, Jesse Jackson's grandson, the congressman said, I know South Africa. This is what apartheid has done. You are basing this on false news and so on. And there's another lawmaker from New York who also argued against this bill. So I'm trying to say that they debate this stuff. It's not a given that it will pass. But even when it passes, it is after a long, long process. And it will need muscle in the House and muscle in the Senate. But it's not all. Trump can veto it. Do you understand what I'm saying? Committee, Congress, Senate goes to the president for signature. Trump can still veto it or sign it into law. That is where we are. It is false to say sanctions are being imposed. A particular piece of legislation, US RSA Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025, has just passed through the committee, and the real battle happens at those levels that I'm talking to you about. So I just want to say that what I find interesting is that the US does not actually need a new piece of legislation to impose sanctions on individuals in the ANC or anywhere else. Remember, this is about the ANC. It's not sanctions on South Africa. It's targeted sanctions. The US doesn't need this bill. Why? Because it has the Global Magnitsky Act. The Global Magnitsky Act already empowers the executive branch, that would be some secretaries, Treasury, State Department, the president himself. They already have the power to target individuals with precise and immediate sanctions. Stay with me here. If Donald Trump or the US administration, the executive branch, wanted to sanction anyone, anytime, anywhere, they can do it today. They can do it today via this very powerful piece of legislation. But what are they doing? They're not doing so. The review of bilateral relations, which is another second element of this bill, is also provided for in other pieces of legislation. What am I saying? There's already a law that enables them to sanction whoever they want to sanction. The second element of this new proposed bill is also covered in other pieces of legislation. Now, given that it is covered in other pieces of legislation, that means that the lawmakers who are against this bill will argue this. They will say, we already have a law, we can apply, we don't need a new bill. We already are reviewing our relationships. The new tariffs that are set to kick in on the 1st of August, 30%, that's a review of bilateral relations. If AGOA goes, that's a review of bilateral relations. So the Trump administration is already reviewing bilateral relations with every single country, and they don't need an extra layer of legislation to do this. So what is this about? I know you guys are scared to say it. I'm not. It is about the ICJ case. It is about the ICJ case. And I say this without any fear of contradiction. Why? If, according to what this new bill claims, they are concerned about corruption in South Africa, why now? Why now? Let me be clear. I hate corruption. We should all hate corruption. We should all punish those who weakened our institutions so that they're not rising to the occasion. We should all be vociferous in demanding accountability for all the money that was looted, for all the corruption that the ANC presided over with its friends in the private sector, for all the corruption that they did nothing about, the killing of whistleblowers. We have every right to demand accountability, but it is a slippery slope when you're going to ask a foreign power, another country, to come and help you with your domestic issues. It means that you are delegitimizing Parliament. You are delegitimizing the election process, because this is where we punish these politicians. You are delegitimizing the judiciary, the NPA, which has been weakened, the police. South Africa has enough institutional muscle to deal with this corruption. It is a slippery slope to invite another country to do it on our behalf. It means we are bequeathing our agency as citizens to others, and that is not a good idea. You can criticize the ANC and still be against a foreign influence in our democracy and domestic affairs. So I made a claim here. I said this is about the ICJ case, because if it was about corruption, we had the Zondo Commission where all the corruption was unearthed. Okay? We found that billions were stolen. We've had the arms deal inquiry. We had the inquiry that looked into SARS. So the United States has known about all these things, but they were not perturbed. It's been years since these commissions and inquiries were concluded. If they were truly concerned about corruption, they would have acted then. But they're not. They're doing it now. The timing is curious. Why am I feeling so confident that this is not what it's about? Do you guys remember what came out of the inquiries, the Zondo Commission? How is the United States going to justify going after some South Africans for corruption without bringing in some US companies that benefited from the same corruption? State capture was not just politicians. The arms deal was not just politicians. There were multinationals that were implicated. I'm not making it up. Okay? McKinsey. Do you remember McKinsey? Do you remember that in the Zondo Commission, we learned about McKinsey and Company, how it partnered with Trillion Capital, a Gupta-linked company, to get lucrative Eskom and Transnet contracts. I'm not making it up. The Zondo Commission said that McKinsey, and I quote, ought to have known about Trillian's lack of capacity and its Gupta ties. What happened thereafter? McKinsey later repaid over 870 million rand to Eskom and 650 million to Transnet. Bain and Company, the restructuring of SARS that the Daily Maverick and Amabungani exposed and reported on, and you also in the media, they wanted to restructure the revenue service in such a way that it weakened and it benefited corrupt networks. The Nugent and Zondo Commission found Bain's actions were part of the capture of SARS. Bain was actually banned from public contracts in the UK and faced scrutiny in this very country, the USA. Okay? SAP, do you remember SAP? Headquartered in Germany, but listed in the US, in the New York Stock Exchange. I can go back. Do you remember that scandal involving Gambade, Gayton McKinsey, and others who benefited in a BEE deal with Goldfields? Goldfields is a South African gold mining company, but it's listed in the US as well. There was a corrupt BEE deal. I mention this because the US itself, via the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, investigated this particular issue. The point I'm making here is that South Africa's corruption also had a foreign head, which involved multinationals, some of whom are based here. I'm also saying there's a symbiosis of local and foreign, international and US actors working with local actors in the story of corruption. I'm also saying there are pieces of legislation already in place to deal with this kind of corruption. And I suspect if the ANC is clever, they will demonstrate that in their lobbying and say, hold on, we already have institutions. What we need to do is strengthen them, single out the people who ought to face the law, and they must face it in South Africa. So in a nutshell, I don't see how they can talk about South African corruption and not bring in these multinational companies. I don't see how they can say they are concerned about corruption now, where over many years, publications, the media, and other civil society organizations have been crying and shouting about corruption, and the US was not really vocal for and against because they understood that these were domestic issues. I'm about to conclude. What I want to say is that it is clear that people who want this legislation to pass are the only ones talking. The South African government, I think, is inept in its strategy and in its communication. You have a special envoy, and I'm kind of sick of this story. Does he have a visa? Does he not? Is he special on what's happening? There are a lot of things happening behind the scenes, but that's not where it must end. Clearly, those who want the bill to pass are lobbying. Let them lobby. It's allowed. It's allowed in the United States. But as a citizen of South Africa, I observe the engagement vacuum that is coming out of the South African side, from the South African side. It doesn't have to be state-to-state politics. International relations doesn't just happen between DIRCO and the State Department. It doesn't happen between the presidency in South Africa and the White House. It also happens in business. It happens in academia. It happens in the cultural space. Why is South Africa not visible? The US has been clear that its engagement with Africa is now commercial diplomacy, meaning transactions, business, cooperating at that level is far more important. There's a think tank called the Hudson, which has been pushing for these sanctions and white genocide and you name it. But there are many other think tanks, credible think tanks. They have events all the time where they speak to different countries. I attend them, for goodness sake. The diplomatic corps from Africa populates these places. We contribute richly to the global market of ideas. Okay? You've got the Brookings, you've got Carnegie, you've got the Quincy Institute. There are many. And every single day they are engaging with some part of doing business with Africa. But South African voices are missing from those forums. The embassy here in Washington, some incredible people there, but they need to be capacitated to tell the story of South Africa, the potential for investment, the business relationships that exist, and so on. And in fact, another thing, there's always a cultural day. I forgot the actual name. There's a cultural day here in DC once a year where all the embassies open up on a Saturday, and we go there with our children, families go. You go there and you sample the culture of that country, whether through food or music, dance, storytelling, whatever. I've been here 2 years. 2 years in a row. All the embassies would be open. It happens in April. All the embassies would be open. The kids would be having a wonderful time in traditional outfits, meeting other children, meeting other adults from elsewhere. The South African embassy doesn't participate. It is closed. Why would you want to be present in a country to claim that the bilateral relationship is important, but you're not present, you are not visible in that kind of tangible way? What you're doing behind the scenes is your business. But why are you not participating in conversation and dialogue so that two nations can find each other? Why do we not have our innovators in technology, in agribusiness, our entrepreneurs, our decision makers in business? Why are they not here? Not lobbying, not doing the work of government, but having conversations with your own counterparts to demonstrate a relationship that is strong, that is alive, that is much bigger than who holds political office at that time. I'm concluding, okay? I am saying that, guys, we are where we are. There is a bill that passed committee. It still has to go fight to be passed in the House and in the Senate. And then it goes to Donald Trump's desk. That's all. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope I've been helpful. I hope they'll be calm. I hope that editors will be responsible in how they report this. I'm not saying this piece of legislation is not going to pass, but it is only a story once it has passed. It is a story once it's elevated, but reported accurately. There is no piece of legislation that has been passed. Not yet. Anyway, that's the Readiness Report. Lovely to be with you again. Catch us on the Daily Maverick or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast from. Bye.